week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, so this week back to whiskey after a couple of episodes of the show on gin. I thought it was time to get back to doing some whiskey, and an episode that's been reasonably overdue, shall we say. The reason I haven't done this before, even though I had the samples since February-ish time, I think it was, Ian has basically asked me not to do an episode of the show until I actually physically received the stock. So last week it duly arrived, and a number of you guys that purchased bottles from us have obviously, well, I hope you've received them by now. What I'm talking about Series 4 release from North Star Spirits, and I think of all the episodes of the show I've done on independent bottling companies, I think North Star is the only one that I've pretty much reviewed each of their preceding three releases, and well, it's becoming a bit of an annual event, and well, Ian releases some damn good stuff, so it's not exactly a chore, is it? You know, fortunately, you may well remember the last time I reviewed Series 3, he'd released 7 whiskies, which like, I've got to cram them in. Thankfully this time he's only released 6. I mean, I don't think it's probably had anything to do with me and the episodes of the show, but anyway, it means I can review all 6 of them, and I'm quite looking forward to doing that. I know that you guys are looking forward to doing it as well, and obviously it seems to me that in each series that Ian releases, there's one that, shall we say, really kind of captures the imagination, and obviously this time round it's the Vega 40-year-old, which I know a number of you guys have managed to get hold of, and for those of you that ordered from us, obviously I had to allocate out because there was obviously more people interested than I physically had bottles for, or that I could fulfill the wants, shall we say. But hopefully everybody got one, hopefully everybody's happy, and you can play along at home if you like. Get your bottle of Vega out when I'm tasting it, and play along, as they say. Anyway, nothing like a bit of audience participation. Anyway, so not really a great deal to say that hasn't already been said about North Star, so we're just going to have a look at the range. Okay, so we're going to kick off with an 11-year-old Royal Brackla. This has been aged entirely in refill bourbon hoggies, or hoggy, as the case may be. I don't know, and maybe I probably should have asked whether these are all single casks. I get a feeling that sometimes some of them are maybe more than one cask. Certainly, I know for definite that one of the bottlings in today's range is more than one cask. But anyway, this was distilled in October of 06. All were bottled in February of 2018. So this is 11-year-old bottled at 55.2. Second bottling we'll be looking at is an Aultmore. This was distilled in October of 2006. Again, bottled in February of 2018. An 11-year-old, and it was originally aged in American oak hoggy before being finished in sherry cask. Don't know for how long, but given the colour, not very long at all, one would have thought, and bottled at 53.2. Then we have a really big jump in age statements. We're up to, well, what is actually on the label 37-year-old Bunnahabhain, but in actual fact it's not really a 37-year-old Bunnahabhain. Well, it is technically. What it actually is, and I don't know how much you guys know about and how much information has been disseminated by North Star with regards to this particular bottling, but Ian has purchased some casks of Bunnahabhain that were distilled in the 70s and had slipped below the legal minimum ABV for bottling as whiskey, and vatted with casks from 1980. So obviously it's technically sort of a vatting, but because the youngest component comes from 1980, and you want to put an age statement on the bottle, then that's what has to be on the bottle. So technically it is a 37-year-old whiskey bottled at 45%, but the reality is it's a bit older than that. So there is a caveat, and I have tasted a number of these bottlings of understrength and overstrength casks over the years, and I have yet to discover one that really doesn't display some flaws, shall we say. And in my experience, those casks that have slipped below the 40% really do show up some flaws, and maybe this is going to be like that. Maybe this will buck the trend, who knows. We'll obviously only know when we actually get round to tasting it. Fourth whisky in the lineup is the aforementioned 40-year-old Vega. Blended malt whisky, aged in both bourbon and sherry hogsheads, bottled at 43.1. Now, I don't know for definite whether this was like the last bottling of Vega, which I think, if memory serves me correct, was some casks that Ian purchased that had already been vatted together. And I honestly don't know whether this is the case with regards to this particular bottling, or whether it's a vatting that Ian has created himself. I mean, he's certainly no slouch in the selecting of quality whiskies, so there's no reason to believe that you can't actually blend them together. But then again, blending itself is quite a skill, as we all know. And then finally we have two peated malts, which is always good fun. The first is a 10-year-old Islay from well, I mean, I know what the distillery is because I've asked, but I'm not allowed to say a dicky bird about it. But it is an Islay distillery. It's not your usual suspects for, well, it does, the distillery is known for producing a peated malt, but shall we say, it's not always renowned for selling its casks. So how Ian managed to get hold of this cask, I honestly don't know. So anyway, it was distilled in October of 2007, thus making it 10 years old, bottled at 57.6 and finished in an ex-Bordeaux wine cask. And I don't know if you can really make it out from here, but it does have a very, very slight pinkish hue. And for those of you with long memories that may well remember the 20-odd-year-old Brackla flirtation, and that spent something like about, I think it was between 3 and 6 months in red wine cask, and came out with this really nice kind of pinky rosé kind of colour. And this sort of certainly reminds me of that. So yeah, it should be interesting, like I said, knowing where that actually comes from. And finally, we're going to be looking at the Ardbeg. Now, it's a 12-year-old Ardbeg, distilled in March of 2005, aged in refill American oak hoggy, and bloody expensive. I mean, yeah, right, well, we know that an Ardbeg cask is going to cost you an arm and a leg, and even if you can get hold of them, and you know, like all of these distilleries, it always amazes me. They basically say, no, well, we don't sell our casks to anybody these days. We keep it all for ourselves. And well, frankly, that's not strictly true, is it? I mean, yes, all right, these could have been picked up on the secondary market, and they may well have been. But you know, even if that was the case, that they certainly were sold at least some time ago, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. It's always nice to see an independently bottled Ardbeg, as there are so few of them. And yes, all right, you have to pay through the nose for them. But generally speaking, the quality is, as you would expect, pretty damn good. Certainly from modern day Ardbeg anyway. So anyway, that's this week's lineup. Let's kick off with a bit of Royal Brackla then, shall we? Okay, so let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Slightly floral, quite high toned, plenty of barley, white fruits, a little bit of granulated sugar, touch of vanilla. That's a lovely nose. And you know, I know that everybody's going to go on about the Bunnahabhain, they're going to go on about the Vega, the Ardbeg, but you know, this is what, 45, 49, 50 quid, you know, and a lot of people just can't overlook some of these whiskies, because these are absolutely, this is a gorgeous aromatic whisky. And Royal Brackla, you know, is it's quite, I think it's got a reputation for being quite a consistent malt, consistently good, shall we say. And certainly I often favour the Royal Brackla bottling from McPhail's and their Connoisseur's Choice range, because it is one of their more consistent bottlings. But anyway, we're not talking about that, we're talking about this one. There's a little bit of coffee kind of coming through. The oak is now adding a little bit of coffee, touch of spice, but still it's very aromatic, very barley led, like I said, white fruits, touch of citrus. Just an absolutely gorgeous nose. Touch of honey coming out now as well. You know, this is very complex, you know, and it just goes to show you don't have to have a mega aged whiskey to have a whiskey that has complexity. So let's see what the palate gives us. Lovely floral, slightly perfumed white fruit finish, but it kicks off with the barley. It's a bit grippy, but then it is bottled at 55.2, so the alcohol is kind of drying a little bit, but it has kind of like pulled out some lovely slightly peppery spice. The barley is very full, there's some lovely honey, it just lingers and lingers. That aftertaste is absolutely gorgeous. Wonderfully full, loads and loads of character. I mean, that's just a lovely malt. And yeah, okay, you can cut that with a little bit of water, but I didn't have enough left in the sample bottle to do so, and certainly it takes water quite nicely. I think, if memory serves me correct, it kind of opens it up, because it brings out a little bit more of the oak, a little bit more of the honey. But even so, tasting that neat, that is absolutely gorgeous, and I love the sort of like the intensity, the vibrancy of it. Not particularly minerally, but wonderfully honeyed and citrus, and just really, really nicely balanced. So yeah, great starter, I think. Okay, so let's move on to the 11-year-old Aultmore. Let's see what another gives us on this end, shall we? Well, straight off you can tell it's, well, I don't know whether you can tell it's Aultmore or not, but it has that kind of fairly dense, malty kind of character that I often get with Aultmore. I mean, Aultmore is a kind of whiskey that a lot of blenders love, because it has a sort of a nice density and maltiness, and it's a good sort of base for a blend to build around. But this has got a little bit of pruniness kind of coming through. The sherry is very gentle, kind of comes across almost like a refilled sherry cask. So it's really balanced, quite elegant, in a dense, malty kind of way. Yeah, a touch of spice, dried fruit, licorice, a little bit of treacle, sort of stroke dark honey. Wonderfully clean, it has to be said. The no blemishes on the sherry cask, and I love it. I think it's a lovely whiskey. It's dense and malty, and quite rich. Touch of cinnamon possibly. Again, just a lovely nose. Very, very appealing. Let's see what the palate gives. Big, rich, mouth-filling, malty, juicy, lovely balance, sherry kind of coming through on the end, a little bit of prune, walnut, dried fruit, raisins, wonderfully spicy finish. My tongue is really, really tingling. That is absolutely fantastic. That is an absolutely gorgeous whiskey, it has to be said, and really well balanced. Not getting a huge amount of oak vanillins. I'm guessing that the initial bourbon hogshead was fairly well used, shall we say. But you know, it's like I said, it's really balanced, really malty, full. It's a very satisfying dram. Right, okay, so I know this is one of the ones that a number of you are looking forward to my review on. So this is the 37-year-old Bunnahabhain. Let's see what the nose gives us. That is a beautiful nose. It is kind of classic old Bunnahabhain. It's got that sort of slightly perfumed, slightly tropical kind of fruit character, some wonderful dusty American oak, you know, that sawdusty kind of character, bit of vanilla, slight creaminess, floral, aromatic. It is just classic old Bunnahabhain. That is just a frighteningly good nose, it has to be said. And maybe this is going to be the under and over strength vatting that will break the mould, so to speak. I mean, 167, something like that. That it would sit on the shelf. Actually, bloody well hope it does. But anyway, that's just classic old Bunnahabhain to me. I've tasted a number of old Bunnahabhains. Lucky me. that display that same kind of sort of floral, tropical. I mean, I could just sit here and sniff this all day. It is absolutely gorgeous. Let's see what the power's like. Unfortunately, the palate does not live up to the nose, and I've told Ian this, so this is not going to come as a big surprise. It's a bit watery, it's a bit vague, it has to be said. Yes, there is some mature barley and there's a little bit of tropical fruit, but by God, that oak bitters, I mean, that really does come in on the mid palate. And this is the big issue that I've had with these under overstrength bottlings, is that it just seems to me, I don't know if there's a scientific reason for why it does it, but it just seems to me that every time I've tasted a whiskey where it's 4 and below the 40%, they've just become overly bitter. You know, maybe there's some of you guys that are watching it a little bit more au fait with the chemistry element of whiskey, and probably could tell me why that is, but I've always found that. And if this had been priced cheaper, even if this was say 120 quid, I would have forgiven it the flaws, and I would have said, look, you know, you're getting a 37-year-old whiskey for 120 quid, it's got a few flaws. And I said exactly the same thing to Duncan Taylor many years ago when they released their range of under and over strength bottlings, which I forget what they called it now, and priced it at exactly the same level as, you know, their standard peerless range. And I said to them, well, what's the point? Why are you going to buy this particular bottling for, say, £140, knowing that there's some flaws, when you're going to buy this one, you know, which is perfectly okay? And yeah, sometimes I do wonder about the whole whiskey pricing structure. I mean, you know, I received fairly recently, what company's updated price list, and we happened to get some of the cognacs from them, and you know, the price rises are just ludicrous. They really are. I mean, you know, okay, yeah, you can argue the XOs, the sort of 25-year-old, 30-year-old cognacs, £10 a bottle is probably neither here nor there when you're looking at £120, £130 already. But to sort of stick 5 or 6 quid, or what eventually becomes 5 or 6 quid once we put our margin on the sort of VSOPs, is kind of pushing it out of the mid-30s and into the early 40s. And it's kind of like, well, you know, sorry, that's just going to slow down sales at the end of the day, and you're doing yourself no favours by hiking the price up. And you know, I can't believe it's all down to the producers wagging their prices up. It's the distributors as well. I'm sure they're basically, and I know some of them really do this, use it as an excuse to basically squeeze a bit more of them profit margin out of their whiskies, and it's basically you guys at the end that are suffering, and us, because I mean, if I have to look at these kind of things and have to say, well, my usual margin is X, and that's going to make it Y, but Y is too expensive, so if I want to sell it, I'm going to have to reduce my margin. But why should I have to do that? But anyway, that's that. I'm just going to get off my soapbox now. But basically, as I've said to a number of customers that asked if I'm going to get the Bunnahabhain, and 167 is really not worth it, in my personal opinion. I mean, please do not just take my word for it. You buy it. If you feel inclined to do so, you taste it. You may well not get the bitterness. Maybe my palate is just more attuned to that. But I mean, the nose was just absolutely gorgeous, and I remember first tasting it and stuck my nose in the glass and went, "Oh my God, this is incredible!" And then the damn letdown of the palate just really sort of like, oh. Anyway. I'm not going to keep going on about it, so we're just going to move on to the Vega. Right, okay, so like I said, I'm guessing this has probably been may well be a vatting of a couple of casks. I mean, I think there was about 400 bottles released, which at sort of 40 years old would seem to imply to me maybe a couple of casks, and also it's American oak and sherry. So maybe I don't know. I'm just guessing here, shall we say? But anyway, let's see what it smells like, shall we? Oh, that's a lovely nose. Just reeks of maturity. Wonderfully balanced. I'm getting barley, vanilla, a little bit of treacle, dried fruit, wood smoke. I mean, it's not a big booming sherry monster by any means. It is just really fabulously balanced. I'm getting a touch of cloves, some cinnamon, pepper, but all the while the sherry is kind of sort of just starting to sort of dominate. But even so, you're still getting the freshness and the sort of vanilla notes from the American oak, and a touch of barley, and it's just fabulously balanced, absolutely gorgeous. So for you guys that managed to get hold of a bottle, you've got hold of a damn good whiskey, that's all I can say. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't really feel like 40. It's just got such a youthfulness is the wrong word, sprightliness I think is probably a better word to use. So yeah, that's damn good. Let's see what the palate's like. Oh God, that finish is good. Right, there's a bit more sherry on the palate. There's a bit more of that kind of treacle, raisinated fruits, dark honey, licorice, but it still has a bit of a lightness to it. There's a slight minerality. There's a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of barley on the mid palate. Fabulous balance, and then back comes the sherry. It has that sort of slightly sub-Armagnac-y kind of character, that sort of prunes, walnut, raisins, treacle. It's so juicy and mouth-filling and mature, and a little bit of baked fruit, and there's some spice, and there's some oh, that is damn good. And again, it has some lovely maturity, but it doesn't feel 40, if you see what I mean. I wish I was that sprightly when I was 40. That's quite some time ago. Maybe I was. I don't know. Anyway, that is just a bloody good whiskey, it has to be said. And Ian, if you vatted that one together yourself, then absolutely spot on. Don't hesitate, we're all about to. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Unidentified Islay, which I think I can probably say that it's on. I think it's on the south of the island. I think I'm allowed to say that, but I probably best not say anything more, otherwise I might get into trouble. But anyway, let's see what the nose gives us in, shall we? Oh, that's classic. Quite full, robust. Some lovely barley notes, but some crisp white fruit, medicinal peat, touch of soot, bit of smoke, little bit of red winey fruit, just an accent, shall we say, un petit accent. I think that was okay for a French accent, wasn't it? Anyway, yeah, I mean it's got that lovely fullness, that robustness, that sort of, you know, depth. It's not sort of like one-dimensional. It's not just a peat monster or oh, that's just fantastic. And the cherry notes are kind of coming out a little bit more now. Now it's had some sort of like some time in the glass, and they kind of like come over the top, and I'm getting a little bit almost maraschino cherry, but not quite. It's a little bit more sort of red cherry, I would guess. Touch of coffee possibly. Not an awful lot of American oak character, has to be said. So you're getting all that wonderful sort of Islay kind of character. Oh, it's just, that's a lovely nose. And I know a lot of people will overlook it because it doesn't have a distillery name on the bottle, but believe you me, you should not overlook this. And yes, for a 10-year-old it's 60 odd quid, so yeah, it ain't cheap, but on that nose that's bloody good. See what the parts like. Oh, that is damn good. There's a little bit more of the wininess on the palate, a little bit more of that red cherry currant kind of character. But it's full, it's barleyed, it's got some lovely dusty peat, a bit of medicinal peat, some tar, licorice, a little bit of coffee, really fabulously balanced, very, very long. With a real iodine-y kind of finish to it, has to be said, and a lovely salty grip. It certainly, it sort of goes finishing cask and then distillery character, peat, etc., etc., and it's got a lovely progression, I think, and it starts off just wonderfully juicy and really, really impressive, and damn, that is good. And finally we arrive at the 12-year-old Ardbeg. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Kind of classically Ardbeg, really, I suppose. Quite dense, bit woody, some lovely barleyed character, a bit of burnt driftwood, coffee, dusty, yeah, quite dusty peat, slightly phenolic, slightly briny, but it's that robust sort of character that I love about Ardbeg, the sort of like the burnt wood and sort of coffee peat. Oh, that is a lovely nose. I mean, yeah, it's bloody expensive. I mean, 180 something, I think, online. That'll be more expensive in the shop, but oh, that's a bloody. And I know there's a couple of you guys that have bought this, and I hope you're watching it. Maybe you've already tasted it already, but that's a bloody good whiskey. That is lovely. And like Ian said, you don't get offered, or should we say, you don't get the chance to purchase casks of Ardbeg that very often, and yes, you're going to pay through the nose for them. So why the hell not? And that's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I'll tell you what, I mean, after reading sort of like endless Twitter feeds about how how people couldn't get online to buy the latest committee bottling of whatever the bloody hell it was. I mean, I've given up on all of that stuff now, to be bluntly honest with you. Every year it's exactly the same. You can never get it because their bloody website disappears up its own backside. Same with the Freud and all of that kind of thing. I just can't be arsed. I just really cannot be asked with it all, it has to be said. And when you can pick up an independent bottling, I mean, all right, it's going to be a little bit more. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the hell the last Ardbeg bottling was. But, yeah, anyway. I seem to have got on my soapbox an awful lot. It's age, isn't it? I'm just becoming a grumpy old man, it has to be said. You know, there's just so much in the whiskey industry that really pisses me off, it has to be said, you know. And, yeah, who can I say it to, you know? Anyway, yeah, that's a lovely note. Let's see what the part's like. Oh, that's bloody good. Robust, full, plenty of barley, plenty of peat, sort of sooty kind of peat, burnt wood, smoky bacon, barbecued meat. Oh, I love Ardbeg, I really do. Especially in American oak. I mean, you know, forget all the bloody sherry cask. You know, American oak, job done, bloody good. A little bit of iodine, a little bit of salt, a bit drying on the finish, but that's kind of the salt, the alcohol kind of combining. Touch of coffee, right on the aftertaste, a little bit of licorice. Fabulous, absolutely fabulous balance. Really, really great whiskey, it has to be said. So that's a nice finish.
How could you? I'm done.
Right, okay. Okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. I hope you don't mind, I've jumped on my soapbox a few times, it has to be said, but anyway, all in all, I think Series 4 releases from North Star. I think Ian has selected some really great whiskies, and long may it continue to do so, and as it continues to do so, I will stick them on the shelves and I will promote them. It's my job, and yeah, I kind of like my job. Anyway, so Royal Brackla, yep, really very, very nice, really complex for 11-year-old. Do not overlook this whiskey, it is fabulous. The Aultmore, kind of classically Aultmore in my opinion, sort of quite malty, quite deep, quite broad, quite complex for a young Aultmore, but in essence I just think it's just an enjoyable whiskey. Really, really very, very good. The Bunnahabhain, well, I think I've probably said a fair amount about the Bunnahabhain, but like I said, you just don't take my word for it, you know. Buy a bottle, try it yourself, and just see what you think. I mean, you may well enjoy it, then again you may well not, you may well then be kicking yourself for spending 160 quid on it. But anyway, that's the beauty of whiskey, isn't it? The Vega, yes, now please do not contact me if you want to buy a bottle of the Vega, because it's all gone. My meagre allocation, which I did manage to get a little bit more of, has now all well and truly gone, so I don't have any of that left. But I do have some of the unknown Islay, 10-year-old, almost bloody well said where it came from then, that would have been a bit of a faux pas, should we say. Bloody good, really, really nice. Just an all-round great whiskey, it has to be said, and when you know where it comes from, yeah, you'll love it. And the Ardbeg, yeah, well, again, kind of classically Ardbeg, it has to be said. It's always going to be a bit of a crowd pleaser, it has to be said. And that is just a lovely Ardbeg, you know, American oak, and I think the thing is, with regards to the independent sector, so many distilleries these days are playing around with casks, they're being funky and all this kind of stuff, you know, and you know, sometimes what you just want is simplicity. You just want good spirit, good wood, preferably American oak in my opinion, distillery character, and that's what you want, and that's what you certainly get with the independents, and that's certainly what you get with this particular range of bottling. So hats off to Ian, another excellent selection. I look forward to Series 5 in a few months' time, I imagine. Up until then, I seem to have no more whiskey left, which is a damn shame, it has to be said. So I will bid you adieu, as I've been using sort of French words all throughout this entire episode, and wish you good dramming and good afternoon.
I just want you to care for us.